All right, welcome to us reading about the radical Republicans. These were members of the Republican Party that would not settle for less. This is a faction, a part of the Republican Party that existed from around 1854 to around 1877. So the radical Republicans were a faction of American politicians within the Republican Party of the United States from around 1854, before the Civil War, until the end of Reconstruction in 1877 with the election of Rutherford B. Hayes. They called themselves radicals because of their goal of immediate, complete, permanent eradication, they getting rid of it, of slavery without compromise. They were opposed during the war by the moderate Republicans led by, at the time, United States President Abraham Lincoln, and by the pro-slavery and anti-Reconstruction Democrat Party, as well as liberals in the northern United States during Reconstruction. The radicals led efforts after the war to establish civil rights for former slaves and to fully implement, that means make happen, emancipation. After weaker measures that didn't really succeed in 1866 resulted in violence against former slaves in the rebel states, the radicals pushed for the 14th Amendment, they got it, and some other laws, statutory protections, through Congress. And they did this to protect the freedmen, the recently freed slaves. They disfavored, they didn't like, allowing ex-Confederate officers to retake political power in the southern United States, and they emphasized, we want equality, civil rights, and voting rights for the freedmen. In other words, freedmen are people who had been enslaved by state slavery laws within the United States. During the war, radical Republicans opposed Lincoln's initial selection of General George B. McClellan for top command of the major Eastern Army of the Potomac, and they had opposed Lincoln's efforts in 1864 to bring the seceded southern states back into the Union as quickly and easily as possible. Lincoln later recognized McClellan's weaknesses, agreed with the radical Republicans that he wasn't that great, and eventually relieved him from command. You fired, good sir. You are fired. The radicals passed their own Reconstruction plan through Congress in 1864, but Lincoln vetoed it and was putting his own policies into effect as military commander-in-chief when he was assassinated in 1865. The radicals pushed for the uncompensated abolition of slavery. That just means that we're going to free the slaves and we are not going to pay the slave owners for them. We don't recognize the slave owners having ownership of people and then freeing them as being something that we should pay them for. No, we're going to free the slaves and you can just deal with it. While Lincoln wanted to pay slave owners who were loyal to the Union for the freeing of their slaves. After the war, the radicals demanded civil rights from freed slaves, including measures ensuring suffrage. They started the various Reconstruction Acts, the different laws that kind of make the era of Reconstruction a thing, as well as the 14th Amendment and limited political and voting rights for ex-Confederate civil officers and military officers. They smartly fought Lincoln's successor, Andrew Johnson, a former slave owner himself from Tennessee, who favored allowing the southern states to decide the rights and statuses of former slaves. After Johnson vetoed various congressional acts favoring civil rights for former slaves, they attempted to remove him from office through the impeachment process, although it failed by one vote in 1868. The very first time we tried to impeach someone, Andrew Johnson, it fails by one vote. You'll read about that later. In the aftermath of the Civil War, Pennsylvania Democrats and Republicans battled at times violently for the control of state and local governments. In the bitterly contested 1866 gubernatorial, that means governor's election for governor, Republican candidate John Geary, a two-star general twice wounded during the Civil War, he beat Democrat State Senator Heister Clymer, who warned white Pennsylvanians against voting for the Republican Geary and other radical Republicans because of their support of the African American suffrage, the right to vote for African Americans. The image on the right, this over here, was a poster made by Clymer's supporters. So Clymer, he was the guy who was already in office. He was very white supremacist. He was a supporter of the South. And after the Civil War, Clymer tried to convince the voters of Pennsylvania, don't vote for him because he cares more about blacks than he does his own people. Notice that in the poster, Clymer's supporters try to make him look distinguished and nice, and they make a very racist, insulting image of African Americans, saying that these are the people who are voting for Clymer, and these are the people, or people who like this, like these people, would vote for Geary. Geary won the election, so that was pretty cool. I hope you're learning, and I hope you're having fun.